Alright, so for this Weka challenge, I decided to try and replicate a paper that applied a couple data mining techniques to studying roll call votes in the US House of Representatives. So the paper pulled information about Congress members' votes on 8 different bills and then applied 3 different machine learning techniques. Namely, those are attribute selection, um, association rule mining, and decision tree analysis. So I didn't use the exact 8 bills that paper used. I did 10, and I did more recent bills. So these are from the last Congress, the 115th Congress, and the information is available online in XML format. So this is one of the bills that I did. It was changing some things about the way corporate governance is regulated. And for every bill, the site has the yeas, the nays, and the non-voting members. The members are coded by party by their font. So Republicans are in standard font, Democrats are in italics, and I was able to use Excel to interpret that into a D or R attribute. And the members' names is their last name with some more details if there's more than one member with the last name. So I collected that information for 10 different bills, and I have those here. So really quickly, those 10 issues are the one that I just went over, moving some things around in corporate governance oversight, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was the bill, the big tax bill. This bill would have strengthened U.S. oversight of Iranian finance. This would have prohibited sanctuary city or sanctuary town, etc. policies. This bill would have required people to provide immigration documentation before they could receive a tax refund. This would have expanded the HCA, the replacement to the ACA. This would have changed some things about that. This was the AHCA itself. This would have required states to honor concealed carry licenses from other states. This bill would have ended U.S. support for the war in Yemen, and this bill would have created fellowships for women in aerospace education. And I say would have, a lot of these did pass. But on top of the roll call vote information, which is what the 2007 paper focused on, I wanted to add a bit more information. So I have member level and district level information as well. And I pulled that from 2 sources. The member information is from a file put together by some journalists about the 115th Congress, and I've cited that in my report. And the district level statistics come from the Census Bureau, and it's made public through the American Fact Finder website. So really quickly, what I have is the member's name and their party, as I said, their district, then the year that they were born, the year that they first entered office, their race, their religion, their public LGBTQ status, and their sex. And then for their districts, I have the percent of the district that's white, so a racial demographic, an unemployment demographic, the labor force participation rate, a couple linguistic statistics, so percent that speaks only English, percent that speaks any Spanish, percent that speaks Spanish and little English, how many veterans there are, some educational attainment statistics, and an income statistic. This is basically how many households live under the federal poverty level. And then I also have a couple electoral outcomes, so who won the district in the presidential election, how much they won it by, and then how much the congressperson themselves won their election by. When it's 100 like this, or even up in like 98.53, the congressperson ran uncontested. So I had all of that information. I did a little further recoding, like I made these NAs missing values, and I was able to convert the .csv here into a .arf file by using the arf viewer. which you can see I actually did several times, going through iterations of recoding some categories and dropping some variables. And those specific things are I reduced a lot of these religion categories. There were like 10 Christian categories to begin with, and I condensed that down to like 3. And I condensed some race categories down as well. And I also dropped all of these identifier variables, because for some reason, like, name was really highly correlated and predictive with like percent of veterans in the district, and there's no good reason that should be the case. So I just dropped those, and I still had the row number, the instance number, as the identifier in Weka. So I loaded it into the Explorer, and I have all of that information here. The class is party, and the first information learning technique that the paper applied was an attribute selector evaluator, an information gain evaluator specifically, and so I've run that. The text on my Weka is really small, and I've played with the resolution and everything, and this is as good as I can get it. So I hope you can see it. But what this says, or tells us, is that these roll call votes are very, very useful in predicting the congressperson's party. And that is as expected. That was the finding of the 2007 paper, and that just makes sense. If you just think about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, who would vote for and against that, it would likely be a very clear split, and we can see that that is the case. Only people in one class voted for it, and mostly only people in another class voted against it. What's kind of unfortunate is that in this data, the way Weka interpreted it, Republicans are blue and Democrats are red, but there was nothing I could really do about that, so it takes some getting used to. But you can see that there's a really clear split here, and splitting on that yields a lot of information gain. There were some of the roll call votes, though, that were not very helpful at all, and those two were the women in aerospace education and the ending support for the war in Yemen. And when we go back and look at the data, that makes sense. These two were the bills that had basically bipartisan support. There were some Republicans who voted against the women in aerospace education, and there were some people in both parties that voted against ending support for the war in Yemen, but generally people from both classes voted yes, and therefore splitting on that is not going to yield much information gain. Moving past the roll call votes and into the demographic attributes that I put in, some of those are helpful, like the 2016 presidential winner yields a decent amount of information gain, and that makes sense. Generally, if Trump won a district, a Republican won a district, and if Clinton won a district, a Democrat won the district. Obviously, there are some cases where that didn't happen, so it's not a perfect predictor, but it is useful. So then the next step that the paper took was uncovering some association rules, and they provided the exact configuration that they used, so I used that. And again, the text is super small, but these rules do show some interesting things. As expected, all of these roll call votes are really strongly correlated with each other. I've limited this to just their 10 roll call votes. I don't even have party in here because that's what the paper did, and every single rule is at or above 95% confidence. So these are all really strong relationships, but some of them are stronger than others, and for example, Rule 3 is stronger than most others, and that is relating to bills that are related to the same underlying issue. So this says that a yes vote on prohibiting sanctuary cities predicts a yes vote on requiring citizenship or green card documentation before receiving a tax refund, and that is at the 97% confidence level. So bills that are related in terms of issues, we have even more confidence about their relationships than bills that aren't as clearly related. So the same sanctuary cities bill related to concealed carry reciprocity and strengthening oversight of Iranian finance. Those relationships are slightly less confident, and they're a bit lower down on the list. And then also the bipartisan bills are generally very strongly related as well. And that makes sense. Most people voted yes on that, so we're going to be able to say pretty strongly that everybody's going to say yes. So that's going to be a rule we're really confident about. And so the final step was decision tree analysis. And again, what the paper itself did was just the roll call votes with party, and so that's how I started. I just have the 10 votes and the party attribute, and the outcome was a really good model. We have over 98.5% accuracy, just based on, I think, 4 of the roll call votes. Interestingly, perhaps unsurprisingly, the first 2 attributes that are split on are the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the AHCA, which were kind of the 2 highest visibility, biggest deal bills from the last Congress, and also pretty much had the highest party purity on votes. So it makes sense that the model would split on those first. If you voted yes on the tax cuts, then you were almost certainly a Republican. And if you voted no on that, but voted yes on the healthcare bill, then you were also probably a Republican. If you voted no on both of those, then it got into some more specifics. And I'm not really sure who these Republicans are that voted no on both of the big ticket bills, voted yes on an immigration bill, and yes on reforming corporate governance, but voted no on concealed carry reciprocity. And I would, if I had more time, I would love to look into that and see who those are and look them up, because I think that's really interesting. But generally, if you voted no on those 2 big bills, then you were a Democrat most of the time. And that was really the extent of the paper. They just looked at roll call votes. But I wanted to take it a couple steps further, and I had all of this demographic data anyways. So I ran a couple more models. First, I just reintroduced everything and ran the exact same configuration. And I still had a model that was really, really, really accurate, 98% basically accurate. And unsurprisingly, again, it split on the 2 big ticket bills, then it split on the immigration bill. After that, it swapped out those 2 or 3 other bills for some electoral statistics, which makes sense. The presidential winner, as we saw in the attribute selection phase, is a pretty good attribute. It yields a decent amount of information gain. And basically what these say is if you voted against the big ticket bills, but you voted for immigration reform, then what decided whether or not the model thought you were a Democrat or a Republican is how much Trump won the district by. If Trump didn't win the district, then you were a Democrat. And even if Trump won the district, but by less than 14.6 points, which is, I mean, even that is a landslide victory. If he won by less than 14.6 points, the model still said you're a Democrat. He had to really sweep the district for the model to predict that the member is a Republican if they voted this way on all those things. So I thought that was really interesting. But I wanted to see what happened because pretty much every single one of these attributes that's used here is really, really predictive. So it's unsurprising that we're splitting this way on these. And I wanted to see what would happen if I dropped all of those and moved to attributes that were somewhat murkier. And it immediately got way more complicated, and I lost a lot of my predictability. I dropped down to 77% after getting rid of all of those roll call votes and the 2016 presidential winner, which all were really, really predictive. So it took a lot of playing around, and I tried a bunch of different permutations. I ultimately wound up getting up to 91.75% accuracy, so pretty decent again, but you can already see that this model is way longer than the previous one. That had 6 leaves. This is 19, so it's over 3 times longer. But I mean, it's still definitely intuitive. The first split is on race. If the congressperson is black, then the model predicted that they would be a Democrat, and that was generally true. Within that, it's split on percent of English speaking. It continued to do that down here. Religion, language, and I mean, it's basically religion and language dominated from there out. Nothing about income or education, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm sure I could go way further looking into who these people are. You know, in every single one of these leaves, there are people that weren't done correctly, so I'd be really interested to know who they are. But that is pretty much the extent of what I did for the challenge, and I was glad I got to do it. So yeah.